by instituting these tax cuts in America, it took about a year and a half, 2 years for it to kick in. People went back to work, unemployment went down to 5.4%, which is about the normal thing. 5.4% is about total, the total of the workforce. You're always going to have that 5% that's not going to be working. So that worked, but what happens by putting them to work, it made more people paying taxes, more money going to the state and local governments, and ultimately the economy came back, and it came back very, very strong, which allowed my father to have the economy to, in fact, bankrupt, if you will, the Soviet bloc, which ultimately brought them to the table and allowed the wall to come down and peoples from all over the world to, in fact, be free. America needs to have a strong economy, because if we have a strong economy, it's better for the rest of the world. When we have a strong defense, it's better for the rest of the world. A strong America is the best thing that can happen to the rest of the world. And so now we're dealing with the fact that our economy isn't that strong. Our economy is weakened because we've gone through a situation. But what's happened is, instead of looking at what the government might have done to cause it, we try to blame free enterprise. We try to blame, the people who create jobs, and somehow we are all at fault for what happened. Instead of looking at what government policies were in place that might have, in fact, instead caused this problem to happen. What a lot of people are not aware of is the federal government, our federal government in the United States, had instituted a plan called the Community Redevelopment Act. And what they had done is they had gone to banks and told banks that you cannot just leave an area where you're banking simply because the people there cannot afford to buy homes. You can't just pick up and close your bank. You must find a way to, in fact, give loans to those people and allow them to buy homes, as if owning a home was a right instead of a privilege. And so the banks were then being forced by regulation and by law to, in fact, give loans to people who just could not afford to ultimately make the payments on those loans. And everybody knew it. In fact, the free market, people in the United States, those of us in Reagan, were warning the government and yelling from the rooftops that this plan that had been put in place in the 70s and reestablished in the 1990s, in fact, would implode the economy of the United States when the people got to a point where they could no longer make their payments. But instead, you have government today, you have people in government who look and say, what can we do to, in fact, have power over people to, in fact, vote for us? If I give you something, will you vote for me? If I give you a house, will you vote for me? And so that's what was happening. And it worked for a while, but now it isn't working at all because the economy is suffering because of it. I find it interesting that, in fact, if indeed you really want to solve the problem, the first thing you would do is look at what might have caused it and deal with it. But all the laws and all the regulations that were put in place by government to help bring this problem about, they're still in place. Nobody in Washington has rescinded any of the laws, any of the regulations that might have caused this to happen. They're still there today. And that is a great concern to get more people. Why wouldn't you get rid of those regulations and those laws that cause these things to go on and cause these things to, in fact, happen? And when you look at government over the years, the fact is, in America today, unfortunately, the fact is, too often than not, many of the people you elect get there and try to figure out how they can stay there instead of how they can do the best for the people who, in fact, elected them to represent them in the first place. And you've heard a lot of talk about health care in America, and everybody should have health insurance. Interestingly enough, I was taught one time in school that for every action there is an equal reaction. When somebody does something, something else is going to happen. In America, back in the 1950s, our government put in what we call wage and price controls on businesses. And basically what it was this, is that if somebody was working for another company and I wanted them to work for me, The government said I couldn't go to that person and offer them a larger salary. I couldn't give them a bigger wage to, in fact, come to work for me. And so the government instituting that law back in the 1950s created a situation in business. How do you get the best people to go to work for you if I can't, in fact, offer them a higher wage? And so industry and business, they're the ones that came up with health care. They're the ones that said, okay, I can't give you a bigger salary, but how about if I give you health care? Will you now come to work for me if I take care of the health care of you and your family? So health care got into the system in the workplace because the government put wage and price controls on industry. So health care gets into the system. Now we're at a point in America where people in government think health care is an absolute right. And they make it sound as though they really care about the people. Somehow I give you health care. But the reality is the health care bill they just passed in the House the other day, and now it will go to the Senate, wouldn't even take effect till 2013. If it was so important to have health care for everybody, why wouldn't it take place like the day after the president signed it? Why do we wait until 2013? Because the next election for president is in 2012. And so if the health care system that they want to put in place doesn't work, there's no chance you'll be elected in 2012. But if you wait till 2013, you can be reelected running on health care. Look what I've done for you. Get elected, and then if the whole thing falls down, it doesn't matter. You're in your second term, and you're not going to run for a third term anyway. Just lay it off on the next group of people that come behind you to solve the problem. So it really is about power. If indeed I own your health care, I really own you. If indeed you have to come to me for your health care, then you're also probably going to vote for me. And what happens is the free market in the country starts to diminish. Walls go up to stop the free market. Because now if somebody runs who is a free market thinker, somebody who believes in the capitalist program, and says, listen, vote for me, we'll get rid of that program, guess what? He'll never get elected. Just like people who run and said, we need to change Social Security, or we need to change Medicare in the United States of America. All of a sudden people say, wait a minute, that's my health care. That's my retirement. You can't play with that. And those people never get elected. And hence, you have two systems in America that are absolutely bankrupt and are in trillions of dollars of debt. And you know what it pays for?